This is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon, and joining me on this episode, it is Andy Timmons, formerly of the band Danger Danger. He has launched a new website called guitarexperience.net that will include lessons, personal stories, rare videos, photos, and a lot more. So we talk about that. We talk about his solo career, his time in Danger Danger, touring with Uli John Roth, and more. And so please check out Guitar, Guitar experience.net for more about Andy. And with that, without further ado, here we are. Here is Andy Timmons. We are speaking with a guitarist, Andy Timmons, of course, for fans of mine, formerly of Danger Danger, because we all love the hard rock of the 80s and stuff. Andy, always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yes, the 80s is still with me as well. How can I be formerly? I will always be of Danger Danger.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. And of course, we'll talk about that Cockroach album at some point, the one with the two vocalists, which by the way, just before we get to the guitar experience, I bought the Cockroach album when it came out years later, and it had both versions with Paul Lane and Ted Poley, and I have to say that both versions are great, and it just depends on your mood. There are some days where you sort of need that Ted Poley, and I don't mean to be disparaging, sort of sugary, sweet vocal.
Yeah.
There are other days you just need that Paul Lane, more sort of rock and roll, but the songs work.
It's funny you say that, because I feel the exact same way. I mean, obviously Ted is the original sound of the band, and the songs were written, with him in mind, certainly. But man, Paul's got just a great sound too. He gets a bit more Coverdale when need be, and he's got that kind of thicker growl. So I'm with you completely. And so when did that record officially come out? That shows you what an expert on Danger Danger I am. But when did that finally come out?
It was unofficially released in 2001. It was one of those sort of record companies that figured, hey, let's find one of these unreleased albums and put it out. But it came, or actually Epic, I think, ended up putting it out in 2001, though. And
if I'm correct, I think Stephen Bruno finally got the rights to license it.
Right. But
because when we finished that record, if it was 92, maybe 93, initially Epic was ecstatic. They loved the record, and then there was the falling out with Ted. He left the band, was suing the band. I think he eventually sued, Stephen Bruno. And then Paul was hired to come in. But by that time, there was so much drama over the record that they just shelved it. And by then, I mean, the musical landscape has certainly changed drastically with Seattle and rap. And, it was a positive thing in some ways, but that's another debate for another time. Yep. But long story short, at that point, the label pretty much made it impossible for the band to retain the rights to the record. I mean, to get the rights back, they were going to charge us like $250,000 or something to get the record back. And that was a heartbreaking turning point. For me, the realization that you could work that hard on something and it doesn't belong to you, But that's the nature of the label industry, especially at that time, was where they owned your work, right? So it wasn't uncommon, but it was just kind of a slap of reality.
That whole thing about you create the art, you write the songs, and then you have no say in it. It's not yours. It's a work for hire, and it's.
I'm gonna throw this out there, Mitch. It seems to have. Now, this is an odd kind of theory, but it seems to have something to do with money. I don't know. Am I crazy here?
Yeah, no, good old money. But yeah, it's just strange to think about it. But anyway, and it was recorded in Morin Heights, Quebec, part of it, which has the great studio where the Police and April Wine and Rush recorded there at Queensryche. Queensryche did Operation Mindcrime there, by the way. And
that's the engineer we were working with was Paul Northfield, who worked on that record, I think.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've kept up, but that great studio of all those yesteryears has fallen into hard times. It's an abandoned property, and if you find it online, it's been vandalized. In fact, I think it burnt down recently as well. So anyway, but all right, let's get to Danger Danger after, because there's so many great stuff. What a great band, by the way. And
That was it was a very fun time in my life, but that the Cockroach record I really thought was a great record. I thought it had a lot of strong material, so you can imagine the disappointment when it just didn't come out until finally, like you say, around 2001, which was I was very happy that it finally saw the light of day.
Yeah.
But obviously a little too late.
Little too late. The train had left the station, and of course.
Yeah, at least the work got to be acknowledged, and I thought that Stephen Bruno wrote some great songs, and I was happy with the sound of it, the performances, and both Ted and Paul, sound great on. So
yeah, they really do. And Danger Danger, by the way, was the first band I saw ahead of Warrant's.
Yeah. Oh man, that was our first major tour. Basically, that was January of '90 or sometime
in that point. And you played a club in Montreal called the Rialto, and I just remember seeing the band and hearing the band and seeing the excitement because I had been there for Warrant, obviously.
Right.
Didn't really know who Danger was because in Canada, much music and radio didn't play those 80s hard rock bands unless you had sold, quadruple platinum.
Warren's song "Heaven" had just gone #1 at that time, so they were definitely doing great at that point.
Yeah, but I saw that show and I went right out and I bought the Danger Danger album because
man,
come on, Naughty Naughty, Under the Gun, Bang Bang, Rock America. I mean,
yeah, I always liked Under the Gun. I thought Ted's voice on that particularly was pretty great. Yeah.
All right, so let's get back to this here. The guitar experience. This is what we're here for. So,
well, I love talking about any and all things. So I'm happy to chat.
Yeah, but let's get to today, and we'll work our way back in retrograde. But guitarexperience.net, and it's not experience, but it's just X experience for fans that want to find it. So guitarx and then experience.net, and it is your new website that is more than just a website. It's a subscription-based site where we'll find a lot of you, how Ask Andy questions, some classic Andy Timmons content, some songs of the month, some video. So just tell me the whole concept behind this here. Take 5 minutes here to lay it out. Tell people how much they're going to pay and what they're going to get for that, because it's the Netflix of Andy Timmons, quite frankly.
It pretty much is. So the initial idea is to offer. It's basically guitar lessons in a loose form, but it's a lot more than that. So every month, I take a song from my recorded history. So we've done everything from, Andy Timmons band stuff. I even took the Puppet Show Danger Danger solo for those fans of that era of shred kind of guitar. But I play it for everybody on camera, and then talk about every aspect of it. I'll take about an hour to literally talk about the gear used, the idea behind the writing of the song. It's transcribed note for note in Guitar Pro and regular guitar tab formats. But then I go through and show, like, note for note, how to play it, basically on camera. So there's that content that's new every month. But then there's also, like, a photo gallery I have. But my concept was, like, instead of posting a bunch of old photos, which I have, man, just stacks of stuff. I've taken pictures with anybody I've ever met along the way. So there's these photos which are kind of cool photographic documents, but I thought instead of writing a little caption, I'm going to tell the story. So I record a story about, the person in the photo with me. So far we've done, like, when I finally met Ringo after, trying to meet him for years, or, hanging with Steve Lukather or B.B. King or whoever, the story behind the person in the photo, what they mean to me, and maybe the story, of the situation of how I met them, and those kind of things. But there's also another section where it's old videos. Like, I've got just, hundreds literally of, studio footage from the Danger Danger days all the way to modern time, my own band stuff, concert footage, or stuff, me playing with the Beach Boys or this Beatles cover band in Japan. Just a lot of fun stuff that's now out on YouTube. And yeah, people can write in and ask me questions, and I'll answer it on camera for them. So essentially, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, because you talk about guitar lessons, and so they're put up there, and people can tune in and see the lessons. But is there an ability for a fan to say, "Hey, Andy, I really want to have a private lesson, and I want you to show me how to do this," or talk about sweep picking or finger tapping, or like, is there a sort of one-on-one kind of basis to it?
Unfortunately, not yet, just because my schedule is such that would be really difficult for me to work out. But so what I am doing in that regard, and I may eventually get into that to be able to do that, But for now, I'd rather take the question, if there's an email form, you send it to me, then I answer it for everybody on camera. So then there's not only do they get the information they're looking for, but then everybody that subscribes to the site has access to it. So I'm not only helping the one person, it's kind of helping everybody that might have that same question, right? So that to me, for me, it's time better spent. I feel like I can record the information once, and then it's there forever, essentially. So I want to that's the other thing that's fun for me is that over the course of the last 5 years, I really saw myself improving as a teacher. I didn't teach consistently for years. I would do guitar clinics, but that's pretty much like, playing. It's a concert with answering a couple questions. But I did a couple of video series for a company called TrueFire a few years ago and found that I really enjoyed it. I had to put together some type of lesson plan and then teach people, a lot of the things I can speak of theoretically, but having to also discuss things that I like, the techniques that I've just acquired naturally over my, 45 years of playing or however long I've been playing. And so I realized I was getting a knack for being able to explain these things in a way that was pretty direct and simple. And so it just kind of felt like time to really do the site on my own. So this year, after a few crazy years of lots of touring, I decided to spend more time at home with my family. And that's basically what provided me the time to, if I was home long enough, I could actually have time to record the content. So It was kind of win-win. I could be home with my family, be productive at home in the studio, recording all these guitar lessons. And, so still theoretically make a living playing music and enjoying the process, man. So I'm just happy to share the information. Like I said, I've been doing it a long time, and I've got a lot of great response. People are really kind of taking the information and learning from it. So.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Ringo Starr and you mentioned the Beatles. Cover band that you played with in Japan. You, of course, did the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band instrumental take in 2011. Talk to me about putting that album together and those arrangements, and what do the Beatles mean to you in terms of life experience and in terms of musicality and in terms of sort of changing the game in terms of music back then? What's the obsession with the Beatles? Or not going to say obsession, but what's the love of the Beatles?
It's been a lifelong passion and love affair, really, because my first musical memory is the guitar solo on I Saw Her Standing There. So backing up, I was born in 1963, which was kind of ground zero for the Beatles kind of taking off in England and Europe first, and they came to America in early 64. But I was born in 63, and my oldest brother was 12 years older than I. So he's like the perfect record buying age, right? And bought every single Beatles single that came out and all the Dave Clark 5 and Kinks and Herman's Hermits and Yardbirds and Animals. So all the British invasion stuff, but primarily the Beatles were really the prime, music I was hearing from day one, essentially. So it was really my foundation. And there really hadn't been anything quite like it. And it was essentially how they were putting together American Motown and pop and blues in a certain way that just came out sounding like them. They admittedly early on were just trying to be, the Ronettes or Smokey Robinson from song to song. They were very open about it. Yeah, we're just ripping off these people basically, but it came out, very much their own thing. But the different thing about them was that they were writing their own stuff, which at that point there weren't many self-contained groups writing their own material and playing it. Like there was maybe Buddy Holly and the Crickets, and that was a rare exception. So they were kind of game changers in that way. So that was, and that still to this day, I could still go back and listen to that music, and it's kind of like a security blanket. It's a very happy kind of music. So to fast forward all the way to 2011, when I eventually got the courage to release that Sgt. Pepper record. Yep. It took a lot of work to get it to the point where I thought it was worthy of putting out there, because over the years certainly I've heard plenty of cool Beatle tribute records, but there's a lot of stuff that I just didn't really think was necessary. So if I was going to do it, it had to be, very personal and unique in some way. And it really started when I had come up with a version of Strawberry Fields Forever, and I was playing it on tour in Italy, and my tour manager was and promoter noticed how man, every time we played that song, the place just went nuts. They really connected with the music. It just the arrangement really worked. And he said, next time you come back, you should play a whole night of Beatles, right? And my initial response was, there's no way, I can't pull that off. But it kind of got my wheels turning, and I started working on, just for my own edification, I would just start working on arrangements where if I could sit by myself and play any Beatles tune. You know, I worked on any song I could think of, in my life, or Help. But I'd begun working from the point of the Resolution record, which was 2006. I started working in a format where I was playing everything without overdubs in the studio, meaning I had to replicate everything I wanted to hear in the track in one guitar performance. So chord, melody, and that's how I approached the Pepper stuff. I was going to see if I could play each song representing all the parts that I hear in my head as I remember the song, and I did all the arrangements from memory in that way. So, but this went on for a couple of years, actually, just as a hobby. At some point, I think I figured that. I thought Lucy in the Sky works great. Then I must have, after that, had the idea, well, what if I could just play the whole Sgt. Pepper record? So that became my goal. And not thinking of making a record. I was just going to see if I could play this just for fun, right? And so sometime around 2009, the Andy Timmons Band got back in the studio. We began work on what became our most recent release, Theme from a Perfect World. We started recording back then. But at the end of the recording dates, my engineer had a session cancel. He said, I've got 2 more days available. Have you got any more tunes? And I didn't. I was out of new material. And Mitch Marine, the drummer in the band, said, hey, man, what about those Beatle arrangements you were talking about? Let's do it. Let's record the whole Sgt. Pepper record. We got 2.5 days. Let's just do it. And that's exactly what we did. I've been working on the arrangements for a couple of years, so I had it together. Mitch knew the tunes well enough, and Mike Dane, he knew about half of the stuff pretty well, but we got about half of my guitar tracks live with the drums. And then it took me about another year to finish the record. That's how I work. I either get it first take or it takes me a year, right? So, but during that time, I know I'm going on for a while here, but during that time, my confidence would be either really high or in the ditch. Like there'd be some days where I think everything's out of tune. This is not going to work. People are going to hate this. I'm not going to put this out. But then I'd listen like the next day and go, this is really working. Okay, I'm going to do this. So it was a long process of really just getting the confidence to thinking that it's working, and that, I think this is something I can put out there in the Beatles world and be proud of it. And I really am proud of it. And it was really, there were no commercial aspirations for it, though it did well. It was more about I couldn't wait to play it for my friends. I couldn't wait to play it for my heroes. Like sending it to Steve Lukather was a big thing for me, and he bubbled over. He loved it, and so it was kind of like, wanting to impress my older brothers. You know what I mean? It was kind of very much with that spirit, because I knew that I was really confident that people my age and older would really resonate with it, because we've grown up. It's in our DNA. We know that record so well. And I think that I represented it, with a lot of respect and a lot of care. And I think everybody that really knew the record well understood what I was trying and hopefully accomplished,
Yeah, so the Andy Timmons Band plays Sgt. Pepper is out there. It's on iTunes and all those things. And it's just a fun take, because, when you try to get people to sound like John Lennon or sound like Paul McCartney, and they're doing their voice and they're trying these weird punk arrangements or metal arrangements or neo-classic, you go, why?
Yeah, I thought, and I think Paul McCartney was quoted as saying he really loved Earth, Wind and Fire's version of "Got to Get You Into My Life."
Yeah, but
and that's a badass version. They took the tune, but really did something unique. But that wasn't my take. My only take was, the guitar becomes the singer. And just trying to be as respectful to the original without trying to reinvent it. But by doing it in that way was pretty original, I think. And not trying to do it where I overdubbed every part, trying to get it exactly like it. I again just tried to represent everything I could in one linear performance, and I didn't do any overdubs on the record. So I think that made it more personal and more maybe more real in some way. Just my heart.
Andy Timmons Band last album, Theme from a Perfect World, which came out last year, actually.
Yep.
Talk to me about that album, but also talk to me about the difference between making instrumental music and how you approach the instrument compared to making a Cockroach or making a Danger Danger album. Because to me, as a non-guitar playing fan, I would imagine that you have to approach both projects very, very differently, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think the overall goal is the same. You're just trying to, with any artist, I think you're really just trying to create the music that you want to hear. You're trying to create something that you love when you're done with it. You know what I mean? So in that regard, it's the same, but maybe the approach might be different. I mean, with instrumental music versus vocal music, certainly, the guitar is the vocalist. And I approach songwriting, either be it lyrical or instrumental, the same way. It's got to have a great melody. Now with lyrics, that's you can be as vague or specific as you want subject matter wise, but with the instrumental, I've often said that language is very finite, but music can go a lot deeper. The expression of the voice or the instrument melodically, can really transcend the very limited written language.
Well,
right?
In fact, talk to me about that, because, and in fact, I'm just going to quote from the press release for a Theme from a Perfect World. It says it's 10 all new tracks of melodic guitar instrumentals, and that's what I have found with your instrumental music and with the Sgt. Pepper that you redid. There is a sense of melody. There is even a sense of song going on. That sounds bad, but you know what I mean.
That's can be a highly overlooked thing in the guitar instrumental world. It tends to be excuses for guitar solos, which...
Well, there's a lot of wankery going on out there, and it just drives me nuts. This oh, look at me, I can play 87 notes in half a second. You're like, okay,
and it's cool, and that's a cool color to have on your palette, but at the end of the day, I'd rather have a good pop tune than a shred fest. If they happen to meet in the middle, then that's awesome. But there's a couple of tunes on the record that maybe doesn't have a solo per se. It's just I didn't feel it was necessary. This is a great song on its own. It's got energy, or whatever the case may be. So my goal, maybe early on, certainly if I'm talking about my early instrumental recordings. Which all my first record, Ear Ecstasy, most of that was recorded during my time in Danger Danger. It was all happening at the same time. So my goal back then may have been more like, well, I want to be noticed as a as a Vire or Satriani, which both guys clearly write great songs also. But they were known as pyrotechnic, flashy players, and that's what I wanted to fit in with those guys. So I tried to squeeze as much of that into Danger Danger as I could, but while being respectful to the band and the tunes. So, I like on the Cockroach is a pretty good example. There's some nice melodic playing on there, and there's a little shreddy stuff here and there, but I was starting to really develop more of the melodic side of my playing, I think more and more. But yeah, the most recent record, I'm really proud of all the songs, and I do love the sound of it and the playing, but at the end of the day, man, if there's no song, I'm not gonna even consider putting it on the record.
Which is great. Now, here's the one thing we in the last interview we did, we talked about being musical director and working with Olivia Newton-John, which I still think is very cool.
Thank you.
But
still love her.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't she great though? I mean, she's such an outstanding artist. She's one of those that transcends boundaries. I mean, as a hard rock metal fan, I should not like Olivia Newton-John.
Right, exactly.
Right, but she just seems anyway. And we know you've done some stuff with Kip Winger. We've talked about that, but your bio always talks about recording sessions with Paul Stanley.
Okay.
Talk to me about that, because I've never explored that with you, and of course I'm a huge KISS fan.
Okay, well, me as well. I mean, that was my first concert. I saw KISS on the Destroyer tour. It was my first concert in 1976. So, yes, and that's how I learned how to play guitar, was the Alive record, and everything from that era of KISS all the way up to Alive 2. I mean, I can still play most of it note for note. Though in the bio, that's from a very old bio, but it keeps getting reused. But basically what that was we did a demo session together in New York. And this came after we did the first time we toured with KISS was 1990 on the Hot in the Shade tour.
Yeah. Great tour, by the way.
Yeah, thank you, man. That was, I'm talking about dream come true for a kid from Indiana that never even thought he'd, get out of Evansville, Indiana, much less be on stage opening for KISS every night. That was certainly.
Who else was on the bill with you on that?
At that point, Slaughter. It was us and Slaughter.
Okay.
And then I think when we left, maybe Winger came on.
Yeah, because when I saw it in Montreal, it was Winger, Slaughter. Hot in the Shade. Oh, not Hot in the KISS.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so we did like a month and a half. It was mainly like east and southeast. I think we were on the East Coast and Atlanta and Florida.
But I don't know how it was backstage and stuff, but out front, it just seemed like everybody was having a great time. I mean, it seemed as though the Slaughter guys were really happy to be there, and the KISS guys with the Sphinx that would break apart. And anyway, but okay, so
we call it Leon Sphinx.
Leon Sphinx. So when were these demos in New York, and for what project were they? Were they supposed to be on a KISS album? Was it a Paul solo album? Was it?
Oh, it was a tune. He was pitching something to Rod Stewart, and so. My memory that this might place the time, there was a gay rights parade that day. It made me late for the session. But it was all orchestrated by, there's a buddy of mine in New York named Bobby Held, who's a bass player, songwriter, producer. He produced Joe Bonamassa's first couple of records and stuff with Joe Lynn Turner. Really great guy, good friend of mine. And he's really tight with Paul Stanley. And he's part of the reason why we got that tour in the first place, is Bobby talking Paul and Gene into taking us on. And so we have Bobby to thank for that. So I guess Paul
I like Bobby. I don't know who he is, but I like him. That's good for him.
You would love him. So anyway, and I found this out. He just ran sound for me. He does live sound as well. When the ATV plays in New York, we play a club called the Iridium. So he came to run sound for us. And he told me a story that I hadn't heard before. So it's like, I was talking to Paul, and he was like, Danger. Paul Stanley saying, Danger has no tour experience. And then Bobby goes, well, put him on a tour. Boom, tour experience. So
right?
I think he was instrumental in kind of helping us get on that tour. Well, long story longer, this was a tune that I think he was pitching to Rod Stewart, and Paul was playing acoustic 12-string. And it was a really cool tune. I unfortunately never ended up with a copy of it, but during the set, it was Eric Singer playing drums, by the way, and so this obviously would have been later. So because after the Hot in the Shade tour, obviously Eric Carr was still around for a while. Yeah, so this must have been after Eric had passed, Eric Carr.
Well, that would put it somewhere, I guess, between 92 and 95, because in 96 there was the reunion tour, so I doubt that he was running around writing songs for Rod Stewart.
It had to be 91 or 92.
Okay.
It's somewhere there because I was still living in New York, so that certainly puts that time constraint on it. But again, he was playing this tune, and he played it down for me so I could hear it. And he goes, well, when do you think I wrote this? I'm like, man, I don't know, but it sounds like an older. And it was something he'd written during the Rock and Roll Over record. So I thought, this is so freaking cool, right? So I don't know whatever happened with the tune, but it sounded kind of like middle of the road acoustic rock, but with a little Motown kind of thing, a little Rod Stewart-y. It was a great tune, but again, I don't think that ever saw the light of day as far as I know. So Paul, if you're listening, I still want that demo.
Do you at all recall what it was called? Was it just the Paul demo, or did it have a title?
I did. I honestly, it's been so long, I don't recall what the hook was. I could ask Bob. Maybe Bobby would remember. Or you could ask Paul. Who knows? Paul, if you're listening, call in Paul Stanley.
Yeah, call in and tell us what that song was. Oh, that's kind of cool. With Gene Simmons, who just released the $2,000 The Vault of 150 songs, I'm quite willing to pay that kind of money for a Paul Stanley The Vault.
Yeah, why not? Oh, there's got to be one, man.
Oh,
that man. Okay, so I read all 4 autobiographies, right?
Yes, sir.
And I'm assuming you have too.
Yes, sir.
Paul was the one that I came away liking the guy even more.
Yes.
Does that, you know what I mean? It's like I had no idea. After all these years, I had no idea about his ear issue. Yeah,
neither did I. That cast it in a sympathetic light, and it made me look back at some of the pictures and stuff and go, I never know he had an ear, so.
I was around him every day for a couple of different tours, and it never presented itself, or he never seemed to favor an ear to try to hear better or whatever. So I think it's a huge, I don't know, man, it's a huge sign of character that he never played on that for any kind of sympathy or any kind of, whatever. I mean, the fact that we found out about it in that book is pretty astounding to me. But the other guys, and again, I love the guys, I love the band, but like the other three, man, I just like, man, this is your autobiography. You didn't have to tell me that. I mean, there were some pretty shitty things about themselves, in each of it was just kind of like, really?
Well, I have to say, listen, and I'm not going to name, but fans who've read them are going to understand. There was one book in particular that was, it's everybody else's fault but mine, wah, 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 and it drove me nuts. Then there was one about, look at me, I'm so awesome. And
of course. Well, we know who that is.
Right, and the third one was sort of like, well, I'm not really sure if this happened because I might have been drunk, but... and it was just like, meh, okay.
Your was pretty specific. Yes, we all know. I mean, yeah, there wasn't a whole... But again, Paul's, I just kind of came out, man, I like that guy even more,
Well, I think he balanced it between... Look at me, I brought this forward, and I have to agree that in the 1980s, especially, if it wasn't for Paul Stanley, KISS would have ceased to exist. So
There's
when
no
he
doubt.
says to me in a book, hey, if in the 1980s I wasn't around, KISS would... I go, yeah, you're right. So I don't take that as being obnoxious.
It wasn't.
And the ear story and the sister story and the whole family thing lent a sympathetic... it gave you a sympathy for Paul, and you go... Okay, I can understand now why you might be defensive on things you've said here or on stuff you've done there. Like, it sort of said, oh, okay, I get the full picture now. And so, no, great book. Let me finish with this here, because you have recently released the exotic Andy Timmons BB preamp. And, of course, we're talking to a guitar hero and guitar... And I don't want to call them in a disparaging way geeks, but guitar geeks are listening in because we love our guitar,
Yes, we do.
Right? I mean, is that a disparaging thing to say, guitar geeks? I don't think so.
I'm a geek from day one on many levels. Trust me, though. That's just I think geek is a wonderful way of saying that you have such a deep passion for something.
Okay, let's call it this way: an aficionado. That's a better word.
It's exactly okay.
So the Andy Timmons BB preamp. Talk to me about this preamp. Why does a guitarist who has 87 pedals on the floor need to check yours out?
Because they need one more, and they know they. No, it's man. Well, we're all fascinated. Every guitar player, we're always searching for the ultimate tone, and that tone is in our head. And I think it's kind of for me, I describe it as a kind of a collection of all your favorite guitar tones you've ever heard, be it, Jimmy and Stevie Ray and Eric Johnson or whoever, Jeff Beck, all these guys that have these phenomenal tones. And somehow you've got this benchmark in your head for what you're trying to achieve. And we're always just kind of chasing that. And we never get there. It's always like, okay, that sounds great. But man, maybe if I had, So there's this whole chain of pedals that come into play. And it's fun. It's just kind of a fun thing. And so being at this point in my career, I'm really very fortunate that I've had a few companies that want to work with me to, either, encouraging me to use their gear, or hey, if you like something of ours but you think you can improve on it, let us know and maybe we could put something together. And that's how the exotic relationship came along. They just approached me years ago and said, hey, we've got a pedal you might like. And by gosh, yeah, I do like this pedal. This is cool, thanks. And they recorded a video of me using the pedal, and it became quite a sales technique for them because once I started using the pedal and people liked my tone, they thought, well, if I get that, that'll help me sound more like, what Andy sounds like if they like that tone, right? So along the way, they changed how the pedal was made and to what they thought was improving it, which in some ways it might have for other people. But then they approached me with like, well, we want to release a special Andy Timmons version of this pedal. What can we do? We would change the look of it. Great. Okay. But I wanted to sound like my very original pedal, like the first one they made for me, right? Because it didn't sound like they sounded anymore. They changed enough things that it kind of moved away from the original design. I said, just get it to sound like my original pedal. And they basically put all the specs back to where they were. They got it, and it sounded really good, right?
Was that the Exotic Effects BB preamp that hit in 2005?
Well, that was the original one that I used, but okay. I don't know. They did two different runs of a special edition with my name on it. And they made like 1,000 of those each time. And and like I say, they were really great, but there was still something about it where I didn't think we'd really captured 1,000%. Well, it turns out they approached me again about, we want to do another run, and I said, well, there's still something missing, right? And it came down to, oddly enough, there was a type of the on, there's a button on the pedal that turns it on and off. There was an older version of that switch that was cheaper and not as reliable, but sounded like exactly. That was the missing component. So they sourced it out. They found the original switch, and now, so they're re-releasing it with that particular switch. And I insisted on it because they had the sturdier, more expensive switch, and it sounded great, but not as good as the one with the other switch. So it's amazing how every little component in these things can make these kind of differences. So again, call it aficionado or call it geek or, tone obsession, but this one really nails it. And so I'm really, really, the old ones sound great too. So if you've already got one, you've got a great pedal. But this one, why not release another version of it and keep fine tuning? And so that's what this version now has done. I think they really captured the original sound of my Magic. I call it the Magic pedal, that original DB that I have.
Yeah, you see, and here's the great thing, and I'll read from the press release, but it includes an Andy Timmons guitar pick and a free trial link to the guitarexperience.net. See?
That's awesome. It all ties in. It
all ties in, and for the aficionados out there, the BBP AT features red casting, 2-active EQ, pre-gain stage, which allows the pedal to go from pristine to clean to smooth, blah, 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 true bypass, etc., 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 capable of 30 clean boosts and smoking overdrive tones. There you go. I got it all in, and...
You over-geeked me. That was more stuff than I needed to know. But I know. Blah, blah, et cetera part. That's the part I resonate with. Yes.
Yeah, I know. There's just a lot of stuff, but I think the most important is the trial to the guitar experience, so you can actually go enjoy Andy. Cool. And, you know what? I will finish with one more thing. The last time that we were in a room together, you were at the, what was it called? The Jennifer Batten, you and Uli John Roth. What was it? The Ultimate Guitar Experience? What was that tour?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Ultimate Guitar Experience.
Oof, memory. I'm getting old, but my memory still works.
You're doing so good. I'm very impressed.
But there you go. Just quickly, talk to me about Uli, because I am a child of 70s music, and Uli John Roth, In Trance, Your Light, Taken by Force. Those Scorpions albums to me are just pristine. What was it like just sort of seeing, and I'll call him the master, at work every night?
Yeah, I will say this. It's the closest I'll ever be to standing next to Jimi Hendrix. He really comes from that era, and it's authentic. I hope that makes sense, because that's the only way that I can describe it. Because there's plenty of really great imitators out there, but there's people that either sing a certain way or play a certain way, and you go, "What? That's authentic," and that's what I get when I stand next to him or just listen to him. And he's just a I call him he's a German hippie, basically. So there's this dichotomy of this one. He's a wonderful German, and everything can be very precise, but he's also an American hippie in some ways, where everything's very, philosophical and loose and all about love, And I just really fell in love with him as a person. He's a great guy. One of my fondest memories was we had a day off in Seattle, and I thought, I need to take him to see the Jimi Hendrix display at the Experience Museum, because I'd been there and I knew they had the Woodstock guitar, right? And like all kinds of Jimi Hendrix, artifacts and studio gear. So he agreed to go. So he and we Ubered. I was the Uber guy. I was taking care of transportation on that tour. And so I got me and Uli a Uber. We went to the Experience Museum. And unfortunately, there was about half of the exhibit was on loan to a museum in Brazil or something crazy. But there was the Woodstock guitar. And he just stops in his tracks. He says, "I've seen that guitar before." Uli saw Jimmy's last live concert in Fairmont, Germany. Uli was there.
Wow.
And so it was kind of this very spiritual reunion. It was cool, I gotta say.
The reuniting.
So was a neat day. Yeah.
But I mean, isn't that the great thing about all of us, regardless of our age, we all have, like, if I were to go see an Ace Frehley Cherry Sunburst guitar in a museum or the Smithsonian, I'd probably have the same feeling that Uli had with that guitar. You just and it's not logical, but you can't explain it, and that's what makes music so great, right?
No, and I'm that way too. I mean, I'm just such a fanboy of all this stuff, you know. So that's what it was for, you know, for Uli. I could tell. I mean, it's an iconic guitar for really almost any guitar player, but he had that connection. He physically, you know, had been there with that guitar, had seen Jimmy play it. So he said, "I saw it get put away in the case, you know, before he left." It was pretty sweet. So he still has that reverence, very much so, for Jimmy, and some great Yngwie stories, but we'll save that for another day.
For another time. And saying, listen to that. We've done 40 minutes, and we've covered the Beatles, KISS, Scorpions, Jimi Hendrix, Danger, Danger, you. I mean, that's a full interview right there. I mean, right?
I appreciate you touching on all bases there. Yeah, right on.
Yeah, we covered it all, and there you go. Andy, always a pleasure. Hopefully you will be up in Montreal or Ottawa again very soon. I saw 2 of those Guitar Experience shows. They were absolutely fantastic. And let's not forget Jennifer Batten. She really delivered.
I mean, she and I bonded so heavily on that tour. She's just a true pro, man. And she's got so much experience. She's smarter than heck and funny. And we had a great time on that tour, and I really love her a lot. And she's got a new record coming out that's a vocal record. She's teamed up with a singer, a guy, and it's really killing rock, man. I forget what the name of it is, but you'll be hearing about that soon.
Yeah, I'll need to check that out, and there you go. Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure.
Mitch, appreciate it, man. Always great to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good one.
Take care, brother. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You're listening to Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Rock Talk.